Namaste all. We are on page 7 of Savitri, Book 1, the Book of Beginnings, Canto 1, the Symbol Dawn. This page begins with a very, very important 4 lines. Earth's grain that needs the sap of pleasure and tears rejected the undying rapture's boon, offered to the daughter of infinity her passion flower of love and doom she gave. So we are speaking here about earth, earth's grain, its nature that needs this, let me see. Earth's grain that needs this sap, we say, sap, this energy of pleasure and tears. See, pleasure and tears is this great duality that we live in now. We compare everything in this duality. I'm well, I'm sick. I'm happy, I'm sad. This is good, this is bad. We can go on and on and on. But the moment we rise out of this body, life, and mind into the higher levels of consciousness, we don't feel this duality anymore. And we see that things that may seem opposite are really together. And finally, when one reaches the supermind, one realizes that everything is one. Everything is perfect. It's just this semblance of things that we live in now that the Buddhist and many of the Hindu sects want to get out of. So they aspire, they offer themselves, they come into this high realization, very high realization, where they unite with the divine. Now, what could be more perfect than uniting with the divine? Buddha left his body. What Sri Aurobindo has told us is that don't forget the earth. Come back to the earth. After you've had this great realization, it's not the end, because he and Mother brought down the supramental to transform this earth into a divine life and the conquest of death. So we see now that earth's grain that needs the sap of pleasure and tears rejected the undying rapture's boon. Well, why did it reject that? Because there is a darkness in terrestrial things, and that's a line also in Savitri later on. Offered to the daughter of infinity. Savitri is the daughter of infinity. She's an emanation of the Divine Mother. So what did they offer to this daughter of infinity? They rejected the undying rapture's boon, and her passion flower of love and doom she gave. Well, Amal Kiran writes to Sri Aurobindo, and he says, what is this passive flower of love and doom? And Sri Aurobindo writes, good heavens, how did Gandhi come in there? Passion flower, sir. Passion, not passive. So I searched the dictionaries on the symbolism of the passion flower. And it's very interesting because in the West, it has many symbols of the Passion of Christ. The central pillar was where the Lord was brutally flogged. And the tendrils are the whips. And the top three stigmas symbolize the three nails that went in two hands and feet, one nail through both feet. Then in India, it's in the Mahabharata about the Kauravas. And there are about 100 petals in this flower. And 5 of the yellow ones in the center, one for each of the Pandavas. The green bulb in the center is Draupadi, the queen of Pandava. The 3 filaments are the Holy Trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. And the radial in the center is the Sudarshan chakra of Lord Krishna. Isn't that interesting that this passion flower, can represent something so totally different in the West from the East. So there's a lot more to share on this. This is so extraordinary. So we know that the passion flower Mother has named Silence. Interesting, huh? Passion flower is silence. But do you know that she named another one? The red passion flower? And she named it a very interesting significance. The power's aspiration to become an instrument of the divine's work. So she also named a third one. But it's a little tiny wild flower, pure white, and she calls it integral silence. So we have 3 passion flowers named by Mother. Now, we continue with Savitri. In vain now seemed the splendid sacrifice. What sacrifice? Savitri's sacrifice, and coming down from heaven where all was perfect and all was supernal. She comes down and she takes birth into these ignorant human bodies. And she has to take birth in the human body because otherwise we could not understand the divine if the divine was always in the heavens. So every avatar has come down to earth. Sri Aurobindo mentions Krishna, of course, Christ, Buddha in his way also, and then the earlier avatars which we've discussed, the 10 stages of the evolution. Now he's going to say something very different. A prodigal of her rich divinity, herself and all she was, she had lent to men, hoping her greater being to implant and in their bodies acclimatize, that heaven might native grow on mortal soil. Now, she is a prodigal. A prodigal is someone who gives in abundance. A prodigal of her rich divinity, herself and all she was. She had lent to men, not given to men, she had lent to men, because she's the Divine Mother. And so she's not going to be with us always in a physical body, but she will be in her subtle body always with us. Now, this next line, hoping her greater being to implant and in their bodies' lives acclimatize. This was not in the earlier editions of Savitri. This is a new line that was found in going through all of the manuscripts of Sri Aurobindo. I told you that Book 1, Canto 1, he revised 50 times. 50 times. And he says, each time I reached a higher level of consciousness, I rewrote from that level. But he never considered Savitri complete. It's not complete. It's a work in progress. We see the Book of Death has only one canto and a few pages, and it's called Canto 3. There's no Canto 1 or 2. And when he asked Narad in 1950, the year of his passing, is Savitri finished? What is there left to do? And Narad said, the Book of Death and the return to earth. And Sri Aurobindo very quietly said, we shall see about that later. So, Savitri has lent herself and all she was to men. She wanted to acclimatize in our human bodies this great divinity where we would realize that we are one with the divine and one with each other. There is no separation. That's only because we're at this lower level of consciousness. Now, Sri Aurobindo changes a little bit, and he says, he's talking about Savitri, but now he's talking about us. Hard is it to persuade earth nature's change. Mortality bears ill the Eternal's touch. It fears the pure divine intolerance of that assault of ether and of fire. It murmurs at its sorrowless happiness, almost with hate, repels the light it brings. It trembles at its naked power of truth and the might and sweetness of its absolute voice. That was one sentence. And I didn't want to break it up. So, what do we have here? We have this earth nature, which is so tamasic, so heavy, that it doesn't really want to change. It changes very little. Yes, the vital nature changes more, the mind it changes more, and the psychic being comes out in us slowly through many, many years. But mortality bears ill here, poorly, bears poorly the Eternal's touch. It fears, what does it fear? It fears a few things. It fears the pure divine intolerance of that assault of ether and of fire. Now we all know the 5 elements, but ether is the 6th, and ether science has not yet discovered. It's like we know what electricity does, but no one has discovered electricity. No one can define what electricity is. Although we know how it works, and we're not there yet. It murmurs at its sorrowless happiness. Well, I think I might have told you last time that most of the great epics have to do with sorrow, challenge, pain. So we see that the earth nature murmurs, doesn't like it, doesn't like this sorrowless happiness. It likes the spice of pain and grief and sorrow. This is something we have to overcome. We have to believe only in light, never in darkness. If we look at darkness, and I was doing on Savitri Sunday with this group, doing this book of the Godheads of the little life. And we have seen there all these asuras and rakshasas and pisachas. And some people, said, well, they help us to progress by challenging us. But I have a different view of it. I think we don't need them. We can keep them out of our lives. Because if we don't take the sunlit path, we are always going to be confronting these negatives. We're already confronting enough in ourselves. Our lack of aspiration, our lack of joyous surrender, our lack of sincerity, our lack of truth. I can go on, but I won't go any further. Are we angry? Do we get angry? No, we never get angry. We are used by these rakshasas and pisachas to put that anger into us. We are only receptive to anger. We are not anger itself. It's a very interesting difference here. And if we can stop them from coming in, the anger goes. I'll tell you a story about my wife and I when we returned to America after all these 12 years in the beginning of Oroville. We go to sleep one night in Houston, Texas, where we had rented a house, and suddenly I see this dark being come on my chest and start to strangle me. And its grip is so strong that I can't call Mother. I'm trying to call Mother. Finally, I get, Ma, and it leaves. Now, at that very moment, Mary Helen turns to me and she said, I've had this being on me trying to choke me to death. And I couldn't call Mother, and I finally got Ma out. Now, this went on for about 10 days. And each time we could call Mother sooner, and finally he left and never came back. But it was touch and go. He could have killed us. He wanted to destroy everything we gained in Oroville and in the ashram. So, we see that this earth nature murmurs at its sorrowless happiness and almost with hate repels the light it brings. Now imagine that line, almost with hate repels the light that the divine creatrix Savitri brings. It even trembles at its naked power of truth. Now, one thing that Mother has told us is that we must not lie in Oroville. We must not tell any lies. There are pages and pages where Mother says, if you lie, I cannot work with you. Very clearly. Now, what is this truth? Mother says, the truth is something living, moving, expressing itself at each second. And it is one way of approaching the Supreme. Through the mind, of course. Others approach him through the heart. The truth is not linear, but global. It is not successive, but simultaneous. Therefore, it cannot be expressed in words. It has to be lived. Sri Aurobindo says, science started on the assumption that the ultimate truth must be physical and objective. And the objective ultimate, or even less than that, would explain all subjective phenomena. Yoga proceeds on the opposite view, that the ultimate truth is spiritual and subjective, and it is in that ultimate light that we must view objective phenomena. So we have to view in that divine light this difficult conquest that we have embarked upon. So the last line of that sentence is, after we see that it murmurs at its sorrowless happiness, almost with hate repels the light it brings, it trembles at its naked power of truth and the might and sweetness of its absolute voice. I don't know if I've told you, but sweetness was Sri Aurobindo's favorite word. And it occurs in Savitri some 84 times, I believe, in 84 lines. And it's the sweetness of the divine that one feels in Sri Aurobindo and Mother. And of course the power is always there, but the love of Sri Aurobindo and Mother for us is, we can't put it in words. It's impossible. Now, Sri Aurobindo's going back to this earth nature and humanity. Inflicting on the heights the abysm's law, it sullies with its mire heaven's messengers. Its thorns of fallen nature are the defense it turns against the Savior hands of grace. It meets the sons of God with death and pain. Now, these 3 lines are very, very important, 5 lines, because every avatar has died or been killed. None of them have lived. And Sri Aurobindo had to give up his life to bring the supermind into the earth. So inflicting on the heights the abysm's law, well, inflicting something is dealing out something, meting out something. And of course, the abysm is an abyss, a huge cave. It sullies. When something is sullied, it's marred or defiled or tarnished. It sullies with its mire heaven's messengers. Heaven's messengers are the avatars and the vibhutis. Now, we were speaking last night of Vivekananda and how he helped the West to open to India so beautifully. When he spoke in Chicago, it turned the Western mind deeply towards India. So read Vivekananda's speeches. All right, what else does it do? Its thorns of fallen nature are the defense it turns against the Savior hands of grace. Well, Sri Aurobindo tells us that grace is something spontaneous which wells out from the divine consciousness as a free flow of its being. And he goes on and on with divine grace. It would take me the rest of our time to, but I do have a series on terminology in the integral yoga that you can see on our website, and you will see many keywords. Our website, of course, is motherandSriAurobindo.in. And our YouTube site is just Mother and Sri Aurobindo, where all our videos can be seen. Now, it meets the sons of God with death and pain. We just discussed that. Now he's going to speak here, and there's something of Christ in these 4 lines. Their sun thoughts fading, darkened by ignorant minds, their work betrayed, their good to evil turned, the cross their payment for the crown they gave. Clear reference to Christ. And then he says, only they leave behind a splendid name. Krishna is revered. Christ is revered. Buddha is revered. They leave behind a splendid name. Now, back to Savitri again. A fire has come and touched men's hearts and gone. A few have caught flame and risen to greater life. Too unlike the world she came to help and save. Her greatness weighed upon its ignorant breast, and from its dim chasms welled a dire return, a portion of its sorrow, struggle, fall. We'll go through these lines carefully. A fire has come, the divine fire, Agni, and Agni has touched some of us. And some of us have even caught flame and risen to greater life. But now he's speaking specifically of Savitri. Too unlike the world she came to help and save. Her greatness weighed upon its ignorant breast, and from its dim chasms welled a dire return. What was that return? A portion of its sorrow, struggle, fall. Well, we know what a chasm is. It's a void or a gap. To weld something, weld a dire return. Weld is a kind of, it's difficult to define it in the usual sense of something, but here it's like rising up, springing up. From its dim chasms welled a dire return, a portion of its sorrow, struggle, fall. And then, now we're going to see what happens to the divine beings, the avatars. And this is especially about Savitri. To live with grief, to confront death on her road. The mortal's lot became the immortal's share. Well, this is very important. We see that the avatar always has to take on the burden of humanity. The avatar has to live with grief. Yes, he has. And here, Savitri has to confront death on her road. And therefore, our lot, the mortal's lot, became the immortal's share. Sri Aurobindo said that he had to suffer all the problems of mankind. Narad writes to him, why do you have to do this? You're the avatar. You don't have to go through what we have to go through. And Sri Aurobindo says, if I didn't do it, you wouldn't understand. So this is the avatar speaking to someone he loved very much, Narad, who was also my very, very good friend. And Narad at the age of 100 used to walk from his room to Golconda. And we would help him climb up the stairs, and he would come in and we would all meet in Temi's room. Temi was the teacher in the ashram of Savitri and literature for 50 years. And he would spend some time with us, and then Krishna Prem and I would help him down the stairs, and he would walk back alone to his room at 100. So we see that the divine has to suffer all that we suffer, but he is able to overcome these things and able to even help us overcome them by his grace and his presence. Now I have to get to the next page. 8. I got it now. Now he begins to tell us what Savitri has to go through. Thus trapped in the gin of earthly destinies, awaiting her ordeal's hour abode, outcast from her inborn felicity, accepting life's obscure terrestrial robe, hiding herself even from those she loved, the Godhead greater by a human fate. So what is this gin of earthly destinies? Trapped in it. Well, a gin is a snare or a trap for men in old England. And it is also the cotton gin. We can see that the cotton gin takes the seeds out of the cotton to make it pure. So we have two definitions here that are quite apt. So she's trapped in this gin of earthly destinies. What are these earthly destinies? Well, the first one, of course, is death.
Isn't gin also like a genie in the bottle?
No, not in this case, no.
As in South Asia, the gin stories go back to.
Pardon?
In South Asia and India, the gin is referred to as, in the folklore.
I'm not hearing you clearly.
He's talking about the magic gin, like
In the folklore of India, it's not that gin.
Now that's DJINN. This is GIN. And these gins do come up in Savitri later on. They're not so nice. Okay. So, thus trapped in the gin of earthly destinies, awaiting her ordeal's hour abode, outcast from her inborn felicity, accepting life's obscure terrestrial robe, hiding herself even from those she loved, the Godhead greater by a human fate. It's very powerful, very powerful. There's another line in Savitri, a God come down and greater by the fall. And here's he's saying the same idea. The Godhead greater by a human fate. Aurobindo Basu has given a talk of 1.5 hours, I believe, on that one line. A God come down and greater by the fall. So, here's Savitri, awaiting her ordeal's hour. What is her ordeal's hour? Can anyone tell me?
taking a human birth.
No.
Fighting the fate.
What?
Fighting the fate and death.
Death. Meeting death. This, of course, is a flashback now. These early cantos are all flashbacks. As I told you last week, I believe, Sri Aurobindo has honored the epic arrangement of things, where the story only begins much later. In this, excuse me, in Savitri, it's book 4, the book of birth and quest. Excuse me. So, we are looking back now. We're seeing Savitri and what she has to do in this world. She hasn't met Satyavan yet. She hasn't gone through the forest and all these great areas to find him in this forest. So we're looking back as a flashback. She's trapped in this snare of earthly destinies. She's awaiting her ordeal's hour. The ordeal is the meeting with death. She is outcast from her inborn felicity, her inborn joy, her inborn ananda. Why? Because she had to take human birth. Accepting life's obscure terrestrial robe. So she has to dress in the human body. Obscure terrestrial robe. She even has to hide herself, even from those she loved. Because we see that when she comes back after telling her parents and Narad that she's found her answering soul, and she goes back for those 12 months with Satyavan, she hides herself. She hides everything that's going to happen. She doesn't want those poor parents to have to live with that knowledge that he's going to die in 1 year. So, hiding herself even from those she loved, the Godhead greater by a human fate. Now, a dark foreknowledge separated her from all of whom she was the star and stay. Too great to impart the peril and the pain, in her torn depths she kept the grief to come. So this dark foreknowledge is of course the fact that she's going to have to challenge death and defeat him in order to bring Satyavan back to the earth. So that foreknowledge separated her from all of whom she was the star and stay. The word stay here is an interesting word. It means something that supports or steadies. Stay is used in so many ways in English. We have the divine staying the creatrix on his chest. In other words, he's supporting her. He's holding her. He is, of course, transcendent, eternal, and he does not do he has no action in creation. He gives that to Savitri, the eternal feminine. So, too great to impart the peril and the pain, in her torn depths she kept the grief to come. And next week we will find out what she has to do and how nature comes in and tries to impede her work, prevent her work. These are powerful passages, and we're only in book 1. How many sessions have we had thus far?
4 sessions.
Well, 4. So, all right, we're up to page 8 with 4 sessions. Okay. Now, I promised all of you that I would tell you a story, and I'm going to tell you a story tonight about Sri Aurobindo and how I first heard him. Didn't meet him at this point. There's a little meditation room in the ashram just before the reading room. It's closed off to everyone now. It used to be open to everyone. It was the most beautiful experience I ever had to go into that room and to kneel before Sri Aurobindo's photo. And I asked my Upaguru, Aurobindo Basu, why do I always come there before I go to the Samadhi? And he said, because Sri Aurobindo has installed himself in that photo. It's an old sepia photo. So one day I'm there, trying to meditate, be quiet, wild Narad. And I become quiet for a few moments. And he sends me my first poem. 4 lines only. These are the currents of my life. Engulf them in thy sea. The tangled threads of earthly strife reweave to image thee. 4 lines. And since then, I believe he has given me almost 2,000 poems. Now, one day I go there, and this is the end of the story, especially for you, Giorgio. Yes. I prostrate myself in front of his photo, completely out flat. And he speaks to me. And he says, and it's good for the circulation too. And that's the first time I actually heard his voice. Yeah. After that, I've met him a number of times, but this was the very first time. It was 1961, 62 years ago now. Yeah.
So did you meet him in person?
No.
Subtle physical.
Yeah, okay.
No, I was only 12 years old when he left his body. I'm not quite that old yet. Okay. Namaste, all. Namaste. Namaste.
I have a question.
Yes, questions.
Can you speak about sunlit path? Because you mentioned something about it.
Louder, please.
What is sunlit path to you, or what is sunlit path?
The sunlit path is the ability to meet any challenge with total faith in the Divine Mother. To meet any challenge with samatha, perfect equality. If we can do that, then all the things that are thrown in our way that we face every day, these egoistic people who say this is the way it has to be or this is the way it has to be, all of that we would face without any negative reaction. That's part of the sunlit path. That these things are going to happen to us. We're going to face these confrontations constantly. But if we can go on the sunlit path, we face them in the light and not in the darkness.